Hello there, I am Man in Yellow and welcome back to another high rank game review video. In this one we will be looking at a game on RCO and it is played between, I'm just gonna call them Dio because I don't know how the hell you would say that name otherwise, and Shadowforce. And the reason why I chose this match for a video is because it showcases something that I've talked a bit about before, where on small maps you often don't want to be the first player going for a large phobie or a win condition, queen piece, whatever you want to call it, because that gives the opponent the chance to counter it with their own like high key phobie, which is often a very bad thing for the first one summoning something big. That's not always the case, of course, sometimes it can be correct, but it is a trap that newer players often fall into where it's like, oh now I've saved up 10 keys, so I'm going to summon a very big phobie, and then the opponent immediately counters you and you are very sad. So this kind of showcases that kind of thing. And it's also just a good game for like showing what you often do on RCO. We see a unicorn with a 1-key opener. This is extremely common on this map because unicorn is just very good. There are fairly few spaces that you can actually stand on in here. Like you maybe see people fight on these spaces or something like that. And if you just put a couple traps down there, you are suddenly very likely to actually connect with an opponent on a trap. Even if the opponent knows where the traps are, they often have no choice but to step on them. So it's very good on this map, just because of there being so little space with all of these blocks in the middle and stuff like that. And it's just unicorn. Unicorn is just very good because it's a 2-key turret, so you get to bring a 1-key. And bringing a 1-key is also very nice on this map because you can often take this point for free, and if the opponent is very slow you can sometimes even take the middle and be very annoying or force them to snowball, which is annoying for them. So that is very good. And like you can technically speaking deal with the 1-key wanting to go down here for free, but then you have to summon like a cassowary or creep down here, and that's bad against the unicorn sometimes, and it gets kind of weird. So most of the time you get to just take a point for free if you bring that like a 1-key with a unicorn, which is rather nice. We see something that I'm not a huge fan of, but it's still something that is very common on this map. We see a murder wing go down here. Often people bring either a murder wing or a, what's it called, tooth fairy down here to take this point. Personally, I think that gravedigger is a much better path. That is what I almost always do here. Very often I go either unicorn with a 1-key on turn 1 into a gravedigger, or just unicorn into a gravedigger. Or I straight up open with Gravedigger and I destroy this block. Then on the following turn I try to take some points or just sit near a point so the opponent can't take it. And then I break one of these blocks after that. And I can get into the point and I have Gravedigger, which I think is a very good phobie here. Because you can destroy these or you can put blocks down to take points for free. Just to annoy the opponent. You very often bring AoE phobies here, so you can use the blocks to get free damage on the opponent. There's just so many good things about Gravedigger on this map that I think it's just better than bringing a flyer most of the time. In some cases you also see people not go for Tooth Fairy or Murder Wing here because they're not that fantastic here. Often you don't play for tempo, and instead they will bank a little bit and then bring a Noxious down here, which is a bit stronger and fits the map a bit more in my opinion. So I also think that's a fairly decent option, but most of the time I just go Gravedigger. I believe you also see Shadowforce go Gravedigger here, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they do. And they just destroy the block up here so that they can easily go up there next turn and make sure that they have that point. Because if you never take this point, then the opponent will just like sit back and do nothing, even if you hold the middle point, which is very annoying. Or they will take the middle point and you will start taking a lot of damage. So you kind of have to get that corner point unless you're playing for like a strategy where you target their phobies instead of the panic points. To just like straight up fight. We just see Shadowforce bring another 1-key. This is fairly smart because if they have more 1-keys than the opponent and can still hold the board equally, that means they can probably take multiple points or just take a point over and over and kind of drain the opponent of health by like being ahead of panic points by 1 all the time. Because the opponent will be able to respond slower to that, or at least that could happen. So that is fairly good, and you will always have some points that you can take with these. So that's a pretty good strategy here. We also see an Inoculus move out, and we see the Gravedigger move down, with the Razormouth also moving down. Also, I didn't talk about this, but Dio has obviously been banking a ton of keys. So right now they are just sitting at a very large amount, which means that Shadowforce can't move too far in, because they may risk getting hit by like Hevo Plate or just a normal Hevo 3.0 if they move very far in, and you don't really want that to happen. Like, for example, if we say that Shadowforce tried to like push over here with the stabbing next turn and go in, hit the opponent with the Inoculus behind, they could get Hevo plated and like lobbed over, and it would be very, very bad for them. So they're just staying fairly far back in a very safe position. They could probably move slightly further up, but there's not really any reason to, so like, why would they? But what they're doing is they're taking this point while also having the next one key to go down there. So that means Dio will kill this one, and then you will immediately reclaim the point. So you will constantly be ahead on panic points. Like, Dio is going to be taking this, and then they will both have 2 points, and then you take it back and you have 3 and they have 1, which means you're dealing hard damage to them for essentially like free. And you can just kind of keep doing this by constantly cycling. And if the opponent wants to stop that, they're forced to bring another one key, like 2 more one keys, so that they can take both the middle point and this point, or the top point and this point. And that will kind of stop that happening. But then the opponent is kind of filling that board with small one keys, which is pretty annoying for them, because that blocks them from bringing a stronger team out. And it also kind of like puts the opponent in a situation where they could maybe just bank or be annoying towards you. Maybe they just go all in while your board is weak. So there are some problems with that happening, which means this is a very annoying situation for Dio. Even though it doesn't look that bad for them, this is actually a very bad position for them to be in. And the Gravedigger I should also talk about. Shadowforce moved the Gravedigger down here, because then next turn they can move it in here and put a block here. And since Dio doesn't have a Gravedigger out, they would have to punch through the block to actually get to the enemy Gravedigger, or they could hit it with an AoE phobia like Klepto or Hevo 3.0, but then that wouldn't even kill the Gravedigger. So the Gravedigger would take the point and like lose 500 health and annoy the opponent a lot, which is very worth it, obviously. So this kind of forces Dio to bring either Gravedigger or Mount Crushmore or some big lobber in here or something on this next turn of theirs, which is very annoying, because that means that they can't do the double one key thing, and they would be forced to bring in something large, or they are forced to just bring Gravedigger themselves, which kind of like puts them in a spot where they are forced to do something which you often don't want to, because if the opponent is controlling what you are doing, that means you kind of are like playing into their hands most of the time. And we see here that they are forced to go Gravedigger. They should probably have brought another one key to replace the Razormouth. Also, this Gravedigger doesn't actually end up staying there, because they obviously brought their own, so it would die if it stays there. But it's just to have like space to move around. We just see a kill on the Razormouth, and then the Gravedigger will move down again, which makes a lot of sense. And I believe we see another one key, right? Yeah, we do. We see a Henrietta. Henrietta is pretty good here, because you can use it as a one key for the same thing, but the opponent also doesn't have any mechanicals, and it can be a little bit annoying. Like, if they try to break a block or something, maybe the Henrietta could get it in on poison. But it's also just to have a one key to throw away. This is a fine one to throw out. So next turn, this Razormouth will obviously die easily, because it already took damage from the corner up here. But Dio doesn't have something to replace here. And then if they don't bring something out to replace, maybe Shadowforce takes the middle point, and suddenly you are at a 3 panic point disadvantage, and you start taking 700 damage a turn, which actually kills you fairly fast. Like, that is only 5 turns of your own turn. It's 10 turns in total, but 5 of your own turns that you get before the heart is dead. So that will put a lot of pressure on Dio. They should probably have been out last turn, because this is a little bit too slow. They're just taking a bunch of hard damage for essentially free. And Shadowforce is just doing nothing. The reason why they're doing nothing here is because there's not really any reason to do anything. They're moving the Gravedigger away from here because otherwise the Cowbell would move in and get a free hit on it, and there's no point in that for Shadowforce. And the reason why they're not taking this middle point is because there's not really any reason to. The opponent is forced to go in and take this with their Cowbell, then you immediately kill the Cowbell and you just replace it with the Henrietta, and you are in the exact same situation as right now where you are up 2 panic points. If you instead take the middle point with the Henrietta, then they will kill the Henrietta and they will take this point with their Cowbell or the middle point, and you will have the opponent will have 2 points and you will have 3, so you will only be up 1 panic point. So that is actually a worse situation to be in, which is why Shadowforce is just waiting. And they don't want to bring another 1 key because that would unit lock themselves, which would be pretty bad. And we see a Hero 3.0 drop in here. So the opponent didn't actually take this point down here. I'm not exactly sure why they wouldn't take this point, because they probably want to bring something next turn and now they can't. It would be a lot better for them if they could bring something that works well with the Hero 3.0 on the next turn. But for some reason they chose not to sacrifice the Cowbell. I'm guessing it's just because they want a little bit more power in case they get to fight next turn. They're probably thinking that they want to go all in on the enemy's team on this next turn. That's just not really realistic, because it's very easy for Shadowforce to move out of here. And it's also very easy for them to bring a counter, because they still have a unit slot open and they have 9 keys to counter this Hero 3.0, which is more than enough when you get to counter. Often you want to counter enemy phobies with something that costs less, and you can do that in most cases, except if the opponent is playing like Billy or something, then I guess you can't, but that's getting nerfed in a little bit, so hopefully we don't get to see any phobies like that again for a while, where it just feels like you can't really fight them in any way. Shadowforce is just moving fully back here, because if they stayed here they would risk getting AoE'd by the Hero 3.0 most likely. Personally, I think they could probably have moved in a way where they could have gotten this slightly further out, because the opponent can still go in if they really want to. They could break a block and hit or something, but they're not going to do that because the Hero 3.0 would risk dying, or at least taking a ton of damage. So I think this erratic should maybe have been 1 further out. Could maybe have placed Henrietta up here or Gravedigger up here, and then move the Stabby here and put the erratic here, and it would be slightly further into the map. But they also don't really need to be in a hurry necessarily, so and Dio just moves slightly forward here. You can see they are sitting on the ability. That is essentially their game plan right now. They're just moving slightly closer to Shadowforce while taking a point down here. And Shadowforce can't really move much further back into the map, so they are kind of forced to fight them here. Because if they don't, then this Gravedigger will walk in here next turn, place a block, or it will probably stand here, place a block, and then they will double hit to deal a ton of damage to Shadowforce's units for very little damage to themselves. They could kill the Gravedigger and deal a ton of damage to this. So that would be very bad for Shadowforce, which means they're kind of forced to either move or place themselves in a bit of a defensive position here. And you can see Shadowforce does something fairly clever, where they split their units up here. So if the Gravedigger goes in and it places a block, it can either go here and place a block in here, but then you can only get 1 hit from the Hero, or it can go down here and it can place a block here or here, but then you will only hit 1 enemy phobie no matter which position you go into. So you can't get any double hits in any way where you hit multiple enemy phobies with a lot of AoE attacks. So this is a fairly smart spread. It also brings the erratic forward, which means you're not going to be staying near there with the Hero 3.0, because this erratic is going to hurt this a lot and it heals a ton from it. So this is a very good phobia for beating Hero 3.0 as long as you can catch it. Which makes this fairly hard for Dio to actually fight. That's also why I think they should have just thrown the Cowbell away, because right now they really wish they could summon another phobia, I would at least imagine. so that they would like be able to bring something in it to deal with this erratic. Like maybe they would bring in a Miss Muffet and try and kill it in one turn, or they could bring in a Smiley and try and disease it. That's probably a bad idea with a Inoculus in here, but you know what I mean, right? They could have brought something to maybe counter the counter, and they would have some like form of game plan at this point, because right now all they can do is just back off and respect this erratic, because in a straight fight they just lose to it. Like this erratic can essentially solo this entire board. As long as it's not getting one shot, it will like very easily overpower them. And we see Shadowforce, of course, killing the cowbell. Maybe you could like make a game plan where you don't do that, but then they would just take another point next turn. So that's not really realistic. And they obviously also want to get rid of their own Henrietta right now, so they're going to throw this away. And this is pretty scary for Dio, because next turn Shadowforce can bring something to help this erratic. I believe we end up seeing a shovel, but it could also have been like maybe you try and phantom it in here, or you bring something in to like bring the opponent in, like just a Miss Muffet or an Octonauty, or maybe they bring a tractor and pull your entire team in, maybe a buffer. Like, you know, there's a lot of different options. So that is very scary for Dio, because if they bring a counter to the erratic here, Shadowforce can then counter the counter, and you know, like then they are ahead, which is also why I said the thing at the beginning where you don't really want to be the guy who brings the big phobie first a lot of the time, because then the opponent brings a counter to you, you try and counter that, and then they counter you again, and you just run out of keys before you can bring another counter to that. At least that's what I've seen happening a lot of the times on small maps. On large maps it's a bit of another story, but on a lot of small maps bringing the big phobie first is actually often a mistake. This is a pretty interesting counter choice. We're seeing a Sasquatch in here. For anyone who hasn't seen this phobie before, because this is a very high stress level phobie, it's the same as Creepy Devil. It goes invisible with its ability, and then if it's stepped on it dies, and it gains a ton of damage boost for the first attack after coming out of invisibility. So the idea here for Dio is he's going to make it invisible, place it somewhere on the map where the opponent will likely not walk, but near enough to the opponent that they can walk up and hit something, and then they will try and one-shot the erratic, and then if they can one-shot the erratic, they probably win, because the Hebo 3.0 is going to overpower the rest of the board most of the time. And like, this can very easily help one-shot the erratic, right? Because this is a ridiculous amount of damage on the first hit. I believe this is a bit over 2000 damage. So you do that on the erratic, then you hit it with the Murderwing and maybe with Hebo 3.0 and it's gone. And you are very happy at that point. Like, that would be the win condition here. Which is pretty interesting. It's definitely a viable way of trying to do it. Although it is also a little bit risky, because you do need to get in melee, and if the opponent just steps on your Sasquatch, you probably instantly lose the game, because that's -5 keys and you will no longer have any way of trying to counter the erratic. So right now, since this is a replay, we can't even see where it is. I believe you could see it if I went from Dio's account maybe, but they could be placing it anywhere in here. It could be sitting here, 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 or here, and it would still have like access to the erratic. It's probably more likely to be somewhere on these spots, because then it can walk up and hit the erratic. But sometimes players with like these invisibility phobies will place them in some spot that seems less likely, just to like confuse you or like try and play mind games with you. So maybe the Sasquatch is sitting down here or down here, where you're probably never going to walk to, and then it will just try and like go in and kill the erratic next turn. That could very well be what's happening. But the most the most sensible place to put it would be right here, right? Because it can always target the erratic then, even if it moves up, and the stabby can't walk directly onto it. But as soon as you start thinking, oh, this is the like most optimal place to put it, the opponent's not going to put it there. They're going to put it somewhere else, because that is where you would first guess that it would be. So there's like a lot of mind games with the invisibility stuff. And often you would just have to like essentially guess, or you have to back off when the opponent is using one of those phobies. Now I should say, I believe Shadowforce can cover 3 of these spots if they want to. but it is also a little bit weird to do because they would like be giving up some of their phobies just to kill the Sasquatch. But like they could move the stabby down here, move this in here, put a block, or just like move it down here and sit here, move the shovel in here and sit here, and then they would cover 3 of these spots, and it would most likely like kill the Sasquatch. But you never know where it is. Like you would maybe lose the game even though you kill the Sasquatch there, just because you're grouping your phobies up and maybe getting hit by a big AoE, and there would be a 1 in 4 chance of the Sasquatch living, so it's probably not worth it to do that. And somehow Shadowforce guessed that it was up here. I have no idea how they guessed that, by the way. Absolutely no clue how they guessed it would be up here, because otherwise this play could be very, very bad for them. Like the Sasquatch was, I believe, here on the other turn. Let me just check to make sure where it was. Just have to go out of the drawing tool. I believe the Sasquatch started out being here, because you can still move it once after that. So they could very well have put it out here instead. Like it could be on any of the tiles that are right here. And somehow Shadowforce guessed that it was up here. I have absolutely no clue how they did that. Maybe it's just luck, maybe they know something I don't, or they've played enough against Dio that they know something about where they normally put their Sasquatch or invisibility phobies. But like, if they were wrong with this play, right? Like, if Sasquatch is sitting here, then the erratic is dead, and this up here might also die. I mean, it would almost certainly also die. And then suddenly they would be in a losing position. So this is a very risky play, but they're also kind of forced to try and do something, because backing off is kind of weird. So, yeah, I don't know how they guessed that, but somehow they just guessed that the Sasquatch would be up here. So it just instantly died, because if you step on an invisible phobia, it just disappears. It just straight up instantly gets killed. Very impressive though that they like managed to just step on that. And Dio just goes in here because they don't really have much of a choice. If they don't go in, they're just going to lose to the erratic. So their plan here is to kill all of the other phobies, and then maybe they can deal with the erratic somehow, or they can run around it, something like that. But obviously, Shadowforce is just going to break this block and deal 1 billion damage to this Evo 3.0. I believe it even dies here, because it deals that much damage. And then they just hit a couple times and it's gone. Yep, it's definitely gone. And that is essentially the end of the game, right? As soon as the Evo 3.0 dies, the game is obviously over on small maps. You're not going to win most games if you summon a Evo 3.0 and it just gets killed by an erratic. But I will say here, both players played very well. Dio definitely gave himself some chance of winning with that Sasquatch. If somehow Shadowforce hadn't just like... I don't even know how they like found out it would be up there. They somehow saw the future, I guess. But like, you can very well imagine how this game could have been very different, right? So if we say on this turn that Shadowforce didn't guess right on the Sasquatch up here, and the Sasquatch is sitting maybe here or here, then like Dio kills this up here with their Gravedigger and their Unicorn, and then they go down here with the Sasquatch, kill this, move the Murderwing and the Evo 3.0 in and hit it, and it's gone. And we're looking at these 3 phobies against this entire team. And there's just no way that Shadowforce would be able to win that fight. So the fact that they somehow guessed like the 1 out of 5 or 1... I didn't even consider this an option when I first looked at the replay, by the way, that the Sasquatch would be here. So somehow they guessed an option that I didn't even think would be there. But they somehow won like the 1 out of 5 thing, or 1 out of 4, 5, 6, wherever it could be. And like the game just ended there pretty much, because the Sasquatch dying for free is like very, very, very bad for Dio. Like there's no real way of winning for them anymore at that point. But if that hadn't happened, this could have looked very, very differently. So both players definitely played very well here. Anyways, that was all I really had for this video. I just wanted to showcase like kind of the whole like countering a counter with a counter kind of thing over and over happening, because I think it's pretty cool, and it's also something that comes up in a lot of games. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.